In a distant time, a time when there were no streets, no lamps, and no clocks to alert you that night had fallen, night would come quietly, like heavy clouds. It would creep through the trees and drape over cold rocks until a person knew it was time to sleep. Humans would look at the sky, but they knew that when the sun set, life closed its doors. They would light a small fire in the middle of the cave or by the edge of the wall. They slept around it, their faces illuminated by the fire in a pale orange hue, their bodies covered with the skins of animals they had hunted during the day. There was no bed or soft pillow, just a pile of dry grass, the fur of a huge bear, or a straw mat. And humans slept like wolves sleep, curled up, watching, listening to the sound of the wind and the sound of water dripping from the cave ceiling, and the sound of repeated breaths, because everyone slept together for protection and warmth. No one stayed up late. There were no books to read, no candles sufficient to stay lit. The fire was fed with slow-burning branches, and when the fire dimmed, everyone knew it was time to close their eyes. Even dreams were too simple to be told. Perhaps one dreamed of a small rabbit they didn't catch, or of rain suddenly falling on the river. There was no one to ask what the dream meant. The dream would pass like a breeze through the cave opening. And so, sleep was a ritual resembling sunset, not something we do because we want to, but because the whole world was sleeping. From this video, we will return to those forgotten eras. We will sneak into the homes of the pharaohs and observe the lanterns in Roman gardens. We will ascend to stone rooms in the Middle Ages and walk barefoot with sleeping pilgrims in the heart of the desert. We return to where sleep was simple and warm. We return to a time when dreams were more honest and the night darker. In the very beginnings, when humans were learning how to light a fire and when the earth itself breathed around them, sleep was a necessity, not a choice, not a luxury, nor timed. He slept when his bones were tired, when the voice of hunger subsided, and when darkness crept from behind the mountains, swallowing what remained of the day. Humans in the Stone Age slept in caves, under dense trees, or among large rocks that resembled the mouths of dormant beasts. They chose a place that made them feel more secure than comfortable, for there was no bed, just a patch of land less harsh than others. In the heart of the cave, the small fire burned quietly, as if whispering, "Sleep now." They were careful to feed it with dry wood, for it was their light, their warmth, and their primary weapon against darkness and the unknown. The fire emitted a faint, misty light, turning the cave walls into dancing canvases of shadow and light. As for sleep itself, it was neither long nor stable. A human would sleep, then wake up, check the fire, listen for any external sound, then slowly return to sleep. They slept in groups, children in the middle, surrounded by arms and backs from all sides, adults distributed around them like a protective belt. Beside them might be primitive dogs or tame wolves living with them, sensing any danger before it approached. They covered the ground with whatever they found. Animal skins, tree branches, or even a layer of dry leaves spread over the cold mud. No soft pillows, no warm blankets, just nature as it is, a hard, raw material, yet familiar. Sounds created a constant background for sleep. The sound of water dripping from the cave ceiling, the creaking of wood in the weak fire, or the howl of a distant wolf that did not frighten them, but reminded them they were not alone. There was nothing in their lives to distract them. No artificial light, no notifications to worry them, no staying up behind screens. The night stretched long, and drowsiness overcame them like a branch yielding to the wind. Every now and then, one of them would dream. They might see a river full of fish, or see themselves flying with the birds, but no one asked about the meaning of dreams. They did not know they were symbols or messages. They were merely images that passed and then faded like smoke. And so sleep in the Stone Age was a part of nature. Nothing complicated it, nothing spoiled it. They slept as the night sleeps over the mountains, slowly, silently, and without need for any explanation. In a distant place where the Tigris meets the Euphrates and where writing, clay, and the plow were born, great civilizations lived. The sun measured time for them, and sleep within them was a ritual with its own sanctity. In Sumer, sleep was not just rest after toil, it was a journey to a mysterious world called the world of dreams, a world where spirits reside and from which gods send encrypted messages understood by priests, interpreted by kings, and believed by all. People lived in houses of dried mud. Bedrooms were small with low ceilings, walls were made of adobe and straw, and narrow windows allowed only moonlight to enter. In the evening, oil lamps were lit with a small flame, spreading a faint yellow light resembling the color of silence. People slept on mats made of reeds or low clay beds covered with handmade fabrics of wool or linen. The beds were arranged near the eastern wall of the house because the east means light and beginnings, and because Mesopotamia was known for its intense heat during the day. Sleep was sometimes postponed until after sunset. They would take short naps during the day, then return to long sleep at night when the earth cooled and the wind whispered through palm fronds. The dream was important, for the Babylonians believed that the gods spoke to humans during their sleep, and that sleep without a dream was sleep not blessed by the care of the god Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing. Kings had special dream interpreters. They would tell them what they had seen, and each dream was recorded on clay tablets in the cuneiform language to be interpreted later, as if it were a prophecy. Among the ancient incantations, there was an incantation recited before sleep that said, "O God, you who walk in the darkness quietly, preserve me in my sleep, and immerse me in a dream that does not frighten my heart." And so, sleep in Mesopotamia was not just rest, but a nightly meeting with hidden forces, where a human extinguishes the fire of his day and drowns in the mystery of the night, reassured or anxious, as the gods decree. In a civilization that grew on the banks of the Nile, where the sun meets the sand, water meets wisdom, the night approached with a weight that did not frighten, but guided. In ancient Egypt, sleep was not a transient act, but an extension of a complete creed in which humans saw that the soul goes out on a short journey and then returns if the gods will it so. The Egyptian called sleep by a name close to temporary rest and likened it to death, not because it was terrifying, but because it was sacred. For them, the soul, called the Ba, leaves the body during sleep and hovers in the world of the dead, then returns at sunrise. And because they believed that sleep resembled death, they loved it, feared it, and respected it all at once. Before sleep, the Egyptian prepared as if going on an important journey. He cleansed his body with running water, perfumed himself with oils of lotus, mint, or cinnamon, and chose a piece of white linen to wrap himself in. He would lie down quietly on a low bed made of ropes, stretched over a simple wooden frame. The beds were often oriented towards the east, towards the sunrise, towards life. The body prepared for resurrection every morning. In the middle of the room, a small oil lamp was placed, burning on a wick, emitting a golden light that danced on the clay walls and cast a silence deeper than the night itself. On a small table next to the bed, a bowl of water and a faience amulet were placed, bearing a drawing of the Eye of Horus, or a small inscribed spell, protect the sleeper from wandering spirits. In simple homes, families slept close together, sharing the room, the light, and even the air. Children slept in corners, wrapped in covers of linen or coarse wool. And cats, those sacred creatures, walked between feet or settled on a sleeper's chest, as if watching their dreams and warding off their worries. As for the wealthy, they had private bedrooms adorned with hieroglyphic inscriptions, perfumes, and dried flowers. The beds were higher, made of wood decorated with ivory or gold, and to the bed was added the wooden headrest, a curved piece that raised the head, examples of which have been found in the tombs of kings. But despite the adornment and luxury, the idea was one: sleep is the departure of the soul, and every soul needs protection. The Egyptian believed that nightmares were not mere fantasies, but messages, warnings, or the effects of external forces. So there were entire texts for interpreting dreams, inscribed on papyrus, speaking of symbols. The crocodile means an enemy, falling means failure, flying means freedom or death. And priests practiced a special ritual called sleep for revelation, incubation sleep, where the sleeper would stay in a temple, sleep there at night, and hope to see a god in his dream. If he saw, he was answered. If he did not see, he remained silent. Sleep was also medicine. In healing temples like that of Imhotep, patients were asked to sleep in blessed places, anoint their bodies with oils, then wait for the solution to come in the dream. And sometimes incense was used to drive away troubling spirits. And a mother would sing to her child, saying, "O sleep, O messenger of the gods, take him gently and return him to me safely at dawn." And so, sleep in ancient Egypt was a complete spiritual experience that did not begin with closing the eyes, but with preparing the soul, and ended with the return of the Ba to the body, with the first ray of sun. Take him gently and return him to me safely at dawn. And so sleep in ancient Egypt was a complete spiritual experience that did not begin with closing the eyes, but with preparing the soul, and ended with the return of the Ba to the body with the first ray of sun. In the quiet plains where the Indus River flows, and in cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where fired brick forms the walls, and breezes move between the straight alleys as if they know the way, there was a silent civilization that lived, slept, and passed like the wind passes. In the Indus Valley civilization, sleep was part of the order upon which the cities, houses, and all of life were built. There was no noise, only a faint system like the breathing of the earth. Houses were designed carefully, consisting of 1 or 2 stories with thick brick walls that provided shade during the day and retained the warmth of the walls at night, making the rooms a suitable place for sleep even on the coldest nights. Bedrooms were built in the inner corners of the house, away from noise, close to the inner courtyard, where moonlight fell quietly on the earthen floor and tree leaves swayed among the shadows. The bed, if it existed, was a low wooden platform or a hand-woven straw mat covered with a simple piece of cloth. The sleeper would lean on a small pillow made of cotton, wool, or even a soft block of straw. Air crept in from the high ventilation openings, while the clay lamp remains lit with a small flame, giving a faint light, insufficient for reading, but enough to make you feel that life is breathing quietly. Sleep for the inhabitants of the Indus Valley was not a religious ritual as in Egypt or Babylon, but rather a kind of return to balance, to silence, to the inside. People began their day with sunlight and ended it when the orange color disappeared from the walls. We have no religious texts referring to dream interpretation, nor inscriptions about gods guarding the sleeper, but the ruins tell us of people who lived with cleanliness, order, and stillness, as if they truly believed that the night does not frighten, but rather mends what the day has spoiled. Sleep was not a disappearance, but a silent, necessary rest in a civilization that did not speak much, but recorded its existence through brick, water, and silence. The city sleeps as its people once slept, under walls of clay, amidst silent sewer pipes, and among alleys that still stand, waiting for someone to dream of them anew. When the sun withdraws behind the mountains and the wind extinguishes its breath among the bamboo poles, the village returns to its silence. A silence that does not resemble stillness, but rather an ancient wisdom understood without words. In ancient China, where life was built on harmony and organized according to the seasons, the stars, and the fluctuations of the dragon in the sky, sleep was a sacred act, not only because it was rest for the body, but because it was a return to the inside, to the self. Taoist philosophers saw in sleep a moment when energies balance. The yin is the darkness, stillness, and humidity, and sleep is the time of yin. If you do not sleep, the balance is disturbed, and if the balance is disturbed, the body corrupts, and the small world within you trembles. In small villages where houses are made of clay and flat wood, the ground is spread with straw mats, and on the wall, a rice paper lantern carries a yellow light like an ancient story. People sleep on their sides, covering themselves with covers made of silk if found, or of coarse linen in poor homes. The bed, if it exists, is slightly elevated with a wooden headrest, sometimes decorated, and underneath it, a small clay stove is used in winter for heating. The child sleeps next to his mother. She sings him a song without a melody, a song repeated by the tongue of nature. Sleep, for the mountains are asleep, and the river is asleep, and the bird on the branch has closed its eyes. Ins from the feet, and from them energy passes inward. In major cities like Chang'an or Luoyang, the wealthy slept in large rooms adorned with silk curtains and perfumed with sandalwood incense or dried lotus flowers. But even these people slept with a quietness resembling the sleep of a farmer in his hut, for China taught them that luxury does not cancel harmony, and that the night does not distinguish between the prince and the woodcutter. In Confucian texts, it was said that good sleep is a sign of an orderly mind, and that he who thinks too much spoils his dreams. So they organized the day meticulously so as not to exhaust the mind or the body, and a person slept as a tree sleeps, without noise, without struggle, without anxiety. And they saw the dream as a message, but they did not interpret it much. Rather, they listened to it in silence and left it time to explain itself or not. In some Buddhist monasteries, monks slept in rows on wooden planks, without a pillow, without a cover, breathing as if they were one body. They slept at sunset and awoke with the first bird opening its wings, a routine in which nothing is broken. As for in ancient Chinese imagination, sleep was not just rest, but a gateway to hidden worlds where spirits meet and ancestors whisper what is not said in the day. Sleep in ancient China was a chapter from the chapters of nature and a pillar of the pillars of harmony, and a faint voice of wisdom that is not recorded but lived. When the sun sets behind the columns of the Acropolis and the colors of the sky begin to extinguish slowly, like the withdrawal of words from the mouth of a tired poet, Athens begins to descend into its silence, a silence that does not resemble quiet, but rather a deep, unspoken thought. In ancient Greece, sleep was not merely a physical act, but a philosophical subject, a poetic subject, and a sacred subject. It is one of the children of the gods, the son of Nyx, the goddess of night, and the brother of Thanatos, the god of death. So sleep and death in Greek eyes are brothers, distinguished by subtle differences, but both lead to unfamiliar worlds. Only by time. In simple homes of stone and mud, they slept on wooden beds spread with goatskin or pieces of linen, and pillows were made of wool or straw, placed only under the neck, since comfort was not the goal, but balance. The air in the bedrooms entered from a small window opening toward the east, where the sun rises first, so that people would wake with the first thread of light, as the sea wakes to the harbor. Wives would go to sleep after extinguishing the oil lamps, gathering the clay vessels, and closing the outer door with a small iron chain that made a soft sound like a thread of rain touching marble. Children slept on mats, and on winter nights, they would approach the stone heater, where smoke gathered in the ceiling and left its smell on the pillows, a smell resembling time. As for the wealthy, they knew decorated beds, padded couches, and curtains made of Egyptian fabric. But even in their palaces, sleep remained sacred, and they kept a small statue of Hypnos, the god of sleep, near the bed, as if sleep needed an invitation. And sleep was not a moment of forgetting, but a moment of passage. It was believed that dreams or beliefs were always moments of connection with what lurks in the inner self, and that they established a connection with all those who lived and with all the creatures of the earth. Are messages from the gods, sent by Morpheus, the god of dreams, who slips through windows and sits on the edge of the pillow to whisper what is not said in the day. In temples, incubation rituals were practiced, where a visitor would sleep in the temple, waiting to see a dream that the priest would interpret in the morning, and a decision would be based on it, whether to heal, to travel, to love, or to forget. Sleep was part of healing, especially in the temples of Asclepius, the god of medicine, where the patient was asked to sleep to dream, then tell what he saw, and then the treatment would be built not on the body, but on the soul. The night in Athens was silent, interrupted only by the sounds of wind between columns, the bark of a distant dog, or the footsteps of a philosopher who stayed up late thinking about meaning, or perhaps thinking about nothing. Sleep was seen as an intellectual necessity, not just a biological one, for a mind that does not rest does not produce sound thought. And Aristotle said that the mind, when it sleeps, produces imaginary images that are not all false. And in the theater, entire plays were performed about a long sleep or a dream that changed the hero's fate. Even poets wrote about sleep as if it were a sea in which a man drowns without getting wet. As for in the countryside, sleep began with sunset and ended with the rooster's crow, without a clock, without an appointment, only with nature. The earth slept, and it had the right to wake those upon it. And so, sleep in ancient Greece was part of a life that thinks, a life that contemplates, and a life that knows that rest is not weakness, but wisdom. When the last torch is extinguished on the edges of the Roman Forum and the moonlight begins to spill over the columns like cold oil, the city, that city full of movement, withdraws into a stillness that does not resemble rest, but rather order, as if even sleep is subject to an imperial law written in stone. In ancient Rome, sleep was not random nor even intimate as in previous civilizations, but a physical function to be performed and then left. So the Romans believed, or so they were meant to believe. The Romans slept in rooms called cubicula, cubicum, small, narrow rooms that did not contain much, only a low wooden bed covered with straw or wool bedding, a stone or wooden headrest, and perhaps a small cross later on. During the day, the cubicula were used for everything from men studying philosophy to receiving friends in business matters, and this made it easy to sleep whenever the need arose. As if dividing the day into hours or lighting torches were strong enough to stop a war cart, not to restrain a function like sleep. For reading, for rest, and at night, the heavy curtains were closed and isolation began. The wealthy, those who lived in domus, had larger rooms decorated with mosaics, curtains of thin fabric, and oil lamps carefully placed on marble tables. But sleep was not much different. They slept early and woke before sunrise, as if the sun did not begin its day before them. In winter, the ancient Roman heating system, the hypocaust, was used, where heat passed under the floor to warm the room from below, so a person slept on warmth rising from the clay, warmth that is not seen but felt like an unspoken longing. Sleep in Rome was segmented. They divided it into two stages. First, sleep after sunset, then a short awakening in the middle of the night for contemplation, writing, prayer, and perhaps whispering conversation, then returning to second sleep. The night itself had two chapters. Slaves and servants slept on the ground near stoves or inside storerooms. No bed, no pillow, only a folded cloak and a wall that did not block the wind but was at least there. Soldiers slept in orderly rows on the ground, wrapping themselves in their cloaks and placing their swords under their heads, not for comfort but for caution. Sleep for them was a duty performed in silence, then ended. And in Roman texts, dreams are mentioned hesitantly, left to the poets, while philosophers saw sleep as a necessity without emotion. Even Seneca once said, "Sleep is a rest for the mind, but it is also a kind of lethargy." The Roman spirit did not love laziness even when sleeping. But deep down, the Romans knew a secret they did not say, that the body does not always obey swords, but demands for itself a moment of forgetfulness, a moment of weakness called sleep. And so, mothers kept the habit of lullabies, singing to children in the evening with faint voices, as if pleading with the gods to grant them a night without worry. And in rural houses outside Rome, sleep was more honest, under thatched roofs and next to the burning fire. The farmer slept after a long day in the fields, not asking about philosophy nor caring about class hierarchy, sleeping only as olives sleep in their jar, quiet and submerged in time. And so, sleep in ancient Rome was part of habit, part of law, and part of the silence the emperor needed to think about tomorrow. When Europe was languishing in the darkness of ignorance, and the West was extinguishing the lamp of ugly thought, the Islamic East was lighting the lanterns of knowledge, one lantern after another, until the night was no longer frightening, but was a time for reading. In Baghdad, in Cordoba, in Nishapur, in Cairo, in the golden Islamic age, sleep was not a moment of laziness, but a moment of recharging for a nation that made reading the first command revealed from heaven. People slept after the evening prayer, as the Prophet recommended, and woke before dawn, then returned to their beds, or opened a Quran, or wrote a line in a book. In simple homes, beds were made of wood, spread with pillows of cotton or wool, and covered with cloaks of local fabric, often decorated with supplications or verses, so even the cover was a prayer. As for in the homes of scholars and doctors, next to the bed were wooden shelves with books on medicine, engineering, astronomy, and mysticism, a book by Ibn Sina and another by Al-Razi. Sleep was part of an intellectual project that began in the day and continued even in dreams. Sleep was important, but not excessive. Scholars would say, the night is for sleep, but not all of it. So they slept in moderation, woke for knowledge, then returned to sleep quietly and assuredly, like one who has accomplished something in this world. And in hospitals, or as they were called, bimaristans, patients were also treated with sleep. Doctors understood that sleep is a medicine like medicine, so they built quiet wards with comfortable beds, faint light, a scent of rose or amber, and the sound of a distant flute. Sleep itself was a treatment. Even in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, time was allocated for sleep, for Muslims understood early that the mind does not work without rest and does not produce without calm, so they made sleep one of the pillars of thinking. And in some schools, especially in Andalusia, small rooms were allocated for students to sleep, named Khalwat ar-Raha, retreats of rest, containing a mat, a lamp, and a breeze from a narrow window. The student would sleep, then wake and continue what he had started of grammar, arithmetic, or geometry. As for in the villages, people slept in houses of clay or mud brick, spreading the ground with a simple rug and placing a pillow of wool. On summer nights, they slept on the roofs, looking at the sky and saying, "Glory be to you. You have not created this in vain." Then closing their eyes and letting the soul travel in a quiet dream. They taught their children the etiquette of sleep, to mention the name of God, to sleep on the right side, to extinguish the fire, and to say the supplication, "O Allah, in your name I die and I live." Even in wars, the Muslim soldier knew how to sleep. He would place his sword near his pillow, but he slept with an intention of safety, not an intention of killing. They would say, "Sleep with the intention of the morning and wake with the intention of work." In Damascus, some perfumers sold sleep oils, oil of lavender and oil of jasmine, dropped at night and smelled before sleep, as if the scent was an invitation to temporary forgetfulness. And in mosques, there was always someone sleeping in the back corner, not out of laziness, but for rest between two acts of worship. And this sleep was blessed because it was in a pure place and at a time unlike other times. And so, sleep in the golden Islamic age was full of faith, blended with wisdom, orderly like prayer and solid like knowledge. No chaos, no excess, but a part of the nation's building. As one of them said, in a time when people were asleep, we were dreaming and waking to achieve the dream. On a cold night, in a wooden hut or a stone wall, the journey of sleep begins in Europe during the Middle Ages, a journey unlike the sleep we know today, nor even what the people of the East knew, but a sleep in which a man escapes his reality to find a few hours of forgetfulness. In that era, darkness was thick, no electricity, no lit streets, only intermittent oil lanterns leaving dancing shadows on the walls. And the night itself was a living creature, moving slowly. People slept on the ground or on low wooden beds covered with heavy blankets made of sheep's wool or animal skins. There was no luxurious pillow, just a pile of straw covered with rough cloth, which might contain insects or ash residue. In villages, the rooms were narrow and contained the only heater in the house, so everyone, father, mother, children, slept together in the same room, sometimes in the same bed, not seeking family warmth, but because the cold outside was merciless. As for the nobles, they had private rooms with high beds and thick curtains, curtains not used for decoration, but to isolate insects, break cold drafts, and give them the illusion of privacy in a time that did not know it much. But even the wealthy did not always have comfortable sleep, for anxiety about theft, revolutions, disease, and the church would creep into bed before sleep. In monasteries, sleep was part of a strict system called the canonical hours, where monks woke in the middle of the night to perform prayers, then returned to a short sleep, then woke at sunrise, a segmented sleep aimed not at rest, but at obedience and discipline. In some old books, it was recounted that Europeans in the Middle Ages slept in two stages: first sleep, then a quiet awakening in the middle of the night for reading, prayer, or even conversation, then a second sleep until dawn. There was no clock hanging on the wall. The rooster was the alarm, or the sound of church bells from afar, telling the peasant to rise to plow the land, gather firewood, or milk the cows before the sun woke. Sleep was linked to superstitions. People believed that nightmares were from the devil, and that Satan might crawl at night and sit on your chest, so they placed a wooden cross above the room door or sacred herb leaves under the pillow to ward off spirits and ensure safe sleep. In castles, guards did not all sleep, but took turns, carrying torches and circling between walls, checking doors in silence. On harsh winter nights, when water froze in jars, people lit charcoal under beds or slept wearing all their clothes, including shoes sometimes, because removing them meant facing the killing cold. Sleep in that era was a necessity, not a luxury, a temporary surrender, not a search for dreams, for he who dreams needs reassurance, and reassurance was rare. Women would spin before sleep, or mend clothes by the heater in silence until their eyes closed suddenly without farewell, just exhaustion. Men would end their day in taverns, then stagger in dark streets looking for their homes or a bed that did not complain of frost. In the end, when the last candle was extinguished and the last sound silenced, the night in medieval Europe was not a time for rest, but a time for escape from a merciless life. And so, an entire continent slept between stone and wood, between fear and superstition, until a day came and a new sun shone. But that, my friend, is another story. When the dawn of the 15th century emerged, Europe began to change. But the change was not noisy. It was like a slow sunrise over the roofs of Florence. Light creeping quietly, not waking, but paving the way for awakening. People began to look at the human body differently. They no longer saw it as merely a vessel for sin, but as a god that must be understood, honored, and cared for. And from here, their view of sleep changed. Sleep came to be considered part of health, an element of balance, as written in new medical books inspired by the works of Galen and Ibn Sina, carrying with them a new understanding of rest. In the homes of the wealthy, private bedrooms began to appear. The family no longer all slept in one room. Sleep became a personal space that might be decorated with a mural or a Bible or an hourglass placed next to the bed to measure the passage of the night. Beds became more elegant, covered with embroidered curtains, but they were still subject to old rituals. A person did not sleep without prayer, and the room door was not left open for fear of spirits that had not yet disappeared from the European imagination. As for artists, the night was different. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, experimented with segmented sleep, 15 minutes every 4 hours, to save more time for painting, designing, and thinking. A strange sleep, but it reflects a mind seeking to reshape the world. In medical books, doctors began to write about the importance of fresh air before sleep, and that sleeping next to an open window was better than sleeping under heavy covers. And so, houses began to be built with larger windows and roofs that allowed the dawn light to enter, so the dawn itself became part of the sleep ritual. In cities, especially in Italy and France, aristocrats slept late after a music party or a long dinner, and servants would enter after midnight to extinguish candles and place the heater in the correct place so the master's body would not get cold in the hour of frost. As for the poor, their sleep did not differ much from the Middle Ages, sleep on straw or on sloping wooden planks. But they began to hear about the sleep of princes and imagine a bed that did not creak when moving. In that era, paintings depicting sleep itself multiplied. A sleeping woman in a lap, a man falling into a deep sleep near an open book, or a small king sleeping among clouds. Sleep became something that could be contemplated, painted, and perhaps understood. In churches, the sermon still warned against too much sleep, describing it as laziness. But it began to distinguish between sleep that escapes responsibility and sleep that repairs the body, as a sculpture repairs a broken piece of marble. Women indulged in special rituals before sleep, combing hair, washing feet, fumigating the room with the scent of lavender, thyme leaves, then taking a look in the mirror, for beauty in the Renaissance was also built during sleep. And so, between a painted painting, a translated book, and a prayer before closing the eyes, the sleep of the Renaissance was formed, a quiet that precedes thought, a rest that precedes creativity. And so we move between civilizations, searching in the details of the night, in a pillow of straw or a curtain of silk, in the silence of temples and the warmth of huts. Sleep, my friend, was never just a nap, but a mirror of time, a mirror of man. So sleep as they used to sleep, quietly under the moonlight and in the embrace of history.